It was an ordinary sunny afternoon in a bustling city park, alive with the chatter of families, joggers, and street performers. Baron Trump, accompanied by his ever-watchful Secret Service agents, strolled through the vibrant scene, his tall figure attracting subtle glances from passers-by. For a moment, it seemed like any other day in the public eye. But then, a faint, desperate cry pierced the hum of the city, a sound so fragile it almost blended into the noise. Baron's steps faltered, his frame stiffening as his sharp eyes scanned the crowded park. His agents immediately went on high alert, scanning for potential threats. In the distance, a disheveled man suddenly darted into oncoming traffic, clutching something tightly against his chest. Screams erupted as cars screeched to a halt, their tires squealing against the asphalt. The scene unfolded in seconds, yet it felt agonizingly slow. The crowd gasped and murmured in shock. In the man's trembling hands was a tiny baby wrapped in a tattered, grimy blanket. The child was eerily still, her face pale and unmoving. A ripple of confusion and disbelief washed over the bystanders. Why would a homeless man have a baby? Someone in the crowd shouted, their voice tinged with suspicion. Baron's gaze locked onto the man. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing on his chest, a gravity that transcended wealth, status, or protocol. The man stumbled onto the sidewalk, kneeling as though his legs could no longer bear the burden of what he carried. His sunken eyes and tattered clothes spoke volumes of hardship, but his trembling hands conveyed a different story, one of love, desperation, and hope. Baron approached cautiously but with purpose, ignoring the whispers and curious stares of the crowd that had begun to gather. His Secret Service agents shadowed him, their unease evident in their rigid posture. "Sir, is the baby okay?" Baron's voice, usually calm and controlled, wavered ever so slightly. The man looked up, his dirt-streaked face etched with tears. "Please help her," he whispered hoarsely, holding the baby out as if offering the last of his soul. Baron's eyes flicked to his agents, who hesitated, their training clashing with the raw humanity of the moment. Protocol dictated caution, but Baron couldn't wait. He knelt down, his hands steady as he took the fragile bundle from the man. "She's not breathing," Baron murmured, his voice barely audible over the crowd's collective gasp. The baby's tiny chest didn't rise or fall, her life hanging by the thinnest of threads. The man's words spilled out in a rush. "I found her near a dumpster. I couldn't just leave her there. I couldn't let her die." His voice cracked, and Baron could see the sincerity in his tear-filled eye. Baron's throat tightened. The situation demanded immediate action. "We need a doctor now," he commanded, his voice ringing with authority. In the distance, the wail of sirens began to build, a sound that brought both hope and urgency. One of the Secret Service agents stepped closer, his voice low. "Sir, we should let the authorities handle this." Baron turned, his eyes blazing with resentment. "She needs help now. We're not leaving." The ambulance arrived moments later, its flashing lights scattering the onlookers. A paramedic rushed to take the baby, but the homeless man grabbed Baron's arm, his grip surprisingly firm for someone so frail. "Please," he begged, his voice breaking. "Don't let them take her. They'll think I hurt her, but I didn't. I swear I didn't." For a split second, Baron hesitated, his gaze meeting the man. In those desperate eyes, he saw something undeniable, pure, unselfish. "Stay close to me," Baron said firmly. He handed the baby to the paramedic, who immediately began resuscitation efforts. The man, who introduced himself as Sam, climbed into the ambulance alongside Baron, the Secret Service trailing with reluctant compliance. As the ambulance doors closed and the vehicle sped toward the hospital, the crowd outside erupted into murmurs. "That's Baron Trump," someone said. "Did you see how he took charge?" Yet, for Baron, the chatter was inconsequential. His focus was on the fragile life, cradled in the paramedic's hands, and the man whose courage had sparked this extraordinary moment. This was no ordinary walk in the park. It was the beginning of a story that would change lives forever. The tense moment after Baron Trump took the unresponsive baby into his arms hung heavily in the air. The infant's tiny body was pale and still, her fragile chest unmoved. A collective gasp rippled through the gathered crowd, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Baron's usual composure faltered as his voice trembled ever so slightly. "She's not breathing," he murmured, the weight of the situation pressing down. The man who had found the baby later introduced as Sam was visibly shaking. Tears streaked his dirt-stained face, his rough hands clutching at the edges of his tattered clothes. "I found her near a dumpster," he confessed, his voice cracking under the weight of his words. "I couldn't just leave her there." His sincerity was unmistakable, and his desperation pierced through the skepticism of the onlooker. Baron's jaw tightened, his resolve hardening. "We need a doctor now," he commanded, his voice cutting through the rising hum of the crowd. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as emergency services raced to the scene. The Secret Service agents exchanged wary glances, their instincts urging them to remove Baron from the unfolding chaos. But he wouldn't budge. One of the agents stepped forward, lowering his voice as he addressed Baron. "Sir, we should leave this to the authorities. This could escalate." Baron turned sharply, his piercing gaze locking onto the agent. "She needs help now," he said firmly, the finality in his tone leaving no room for argument. His attention shifted back to the baby, cradling her gently but with urgency. When the ambulance arrived, paramedics leaped into action. A young woman dressed in the familiar Navy uniform of emergency responders approached swiftly. "Sir, we'll take her from here," she said, reaching for the baby. Baron hesitated for only a moment before carefully handing the infant over. The baby's stillness was haunting, and the paramedics worked quickly to assess her condition. Meanwhile, Sam grabbed Baron's arm, his grip firm despite his frailty. "Please," he pleaded, his voice barely above a whisper. "Don't let them take her. They'll think I hurt her, but I didn't, I swear I did." His eyes, bloodshot and weary, locked onto Baron. Baron paused, considering the desperation in Sam's words. The man was a picture of exhaustion and despair, but his love for the baby was painfully clear. Baron nodded. "Stay close to me," he said, his voice steady. He gestured for Sam to follow as the paramedics prepared to load the baby into the ambulance. The agents, visibly uncomfortable with the deviation from protocol, exchanged glances but ultimately complied. Baron stepped into the ambulance alongside Sam, the weight of his decision pressing heavily on his shoulders. This was no longer just about protocol or appearances. It was about doing what was right. Inside the ambulance, the atmosphere was charged with tension. The baby, now in the hands of the paramedics, was hooked up to medical equipment. The faint sound of a heartbeat monitor punctuated the silence, offering a fragile glimmer of. Sam sat hunched beside Baron, his rough hands gripping the edges of the seat as though the world around him might collapse at any moment. "I found her crying this morning," Sam admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "Near the dumpster where I sleep. She's just a baby. I couldn't let her die." His words hung in the air, and Baron felt a lump rise in his throat. The raw honesty in Sam's voice cut through any. The ambulance jolted as it reached the hospital, the doors swinging open with urgency. Paramedics rushed the baby inside, their movements a blur of efficiency. Baron turned to Sam, who was frozen in place, his eyes wide with fear and uncertainty. "Come with me," Baron said firmly, extending a hand. Sam hesitated for only a moment before nodding. As they stepped into the chaos of the hospital, Baron felt the weight of every decision he had made that day. His agents hovered nearby, their eyes darting between him and the unfolding scene. Despite their unease, they followed his lead. Baron's focus remained unwavering. He wasn't just standing by the baby, he was standing by the man who had risked everything to save. In the hospital's bright, bustling lobby, time seemed to stand still. Sam wrung his hands nervously, while Baron paced with quiet determination. When Sam finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "Do you think she'll be okay?" Baron stopped mid-step, his eyes meeting Sam's. "She has to be," he said, the conviction in his voice leaving no room for doubt. Through it all, one thing was clear. Baron's actions that day weren't just about saving a life, they were a testament to compassion, courage, and the belief that no one should stand alone in a moment of need. The ambulance raced through the crowded city streets, its sirens wailing. Inside, the paramedics worked frantically to stabilize the baby. Her tiny chest barely moved, her breath shallow and uneven. Baron Trump sat on one side, his tall frame hunched forward, watching every move with uncharacteristic vulnerability. On the other side sat Sam, the disheveled man who had found the baby near a dumpster. His hands trembled as he clutched the edges of the seat, his eyes darting between Baron and the baby. "She's been like this for hours," Sam confessed, his voice shaking. "I didn't know what to do." Baron turned to him, his expression tense but empathetic. "What's her name?" he asked softly. Sam hesitated, his voice cracking. "I called her Hope. It just felt right." Baron nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He looked at the baby, now hooked up to wires and monitors, her frail body fighting for life. The paramedics exchanged grim looks, their silence more telling than any words. As the ambulance screeched to a halt outside the hospital, the doors swung open, and the medical team rushed to take Hope inside. Baron stepped out immediately, motioning for Sam to follow. Despite the Secret Service agents urging him to stay back, Baron remained steadfast, his focus on the hospital lobby was a whirlwind of activity, with doctors and nurses moving quickly. Baron stayed close, watching as the baby was whisked into a treatment. Sam, however, hesitated at the entrance, his anxiety and shame pulling him back. "I shouldn't be here," he muttered, his voice barely audible. Baron turned sharply, his voice firm. "You found her. You saved her life. You belong here." Sam's shoulders sagged, and he followed reluctantly, his worn shoes scuffing the polished floor. Inside the waiting area, Baron paced while Sam slumped into a chair, his hands gripping his neck. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Finally, a doctor emerged, his face etched with concern. "Are you the baby's guardians?" the doctor asked, looking between Baron and Sam. Sam hesitated, but Baron stepped forward without hesitation. "We are," he said firmly, the weight of responsibility clear in his voice. The doctor sighed. "She's severely malnourished and dehydrated. It's a miracle she survived this." Sam buried his face in his hands, tears spilling down his cheeks. "I didn't know how bad it was," he whispered. "I just couldn't leave her." Baron placed a hand on Sam's shoulder, his grip steady and reassuring. "You did more than most people would," he said. "Now we'll make sure she gets the help she needs." The doctor nodded, though his gaze lingered on Sam's tattered appearance. "She'll need extensive care, but we'll do everything we can." Baron's voice hardened with resolve. "Do whatever it takes. I'll handle the expense." Sam looked at Baron, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. Baron met his gaze evenly. "Because she deserves a chance. And so do you." As Hope was transferred to the neonatal unit, Baron stayed by Sam's side, his presence a quiet but powerful statement. He wasn't just advocating for a helpless baby, he was standing up for the man who had risked everything to save. As Baron Trump sat beside Sam in the hospital waiting room, waiting anxiously for updates on the baby named Hope, the story of the man who had saved her began to unfold. Sam, the man whose desperate act of compassion had brought them all here, hesitated before speaking, as if unsure how much to reveal. But slowly, his story emerged, a tale of resilience, heartbreak, and an unwavering spark of humanity. "I wasn't always like this," Sam began, his voice barely above a whisper. He stared down at his hands, weathered and calloused from years of hard. Baron leaned forward, listening intently, his sharp features softening as he absorbed every word. Sam's life, it turned out, had once been far different. He had been a teacher, someone who inspired young minds and believed in the transformative power of education. "I used to love standing in front of a classroom," he said, a faint smile flickering across his face. "Helping kids discover what they were capable of, it gave me purpose. It made me feel like I mattered. But life, unpredictable and merciless, had other plans." Sam's voice grew heavier as he recounted the tragedy that changed everything. "It was a car accident," he said, his eyes clouding with pain. "My wife and daughter, they didn't make." The weight of those words hung in the air, silencing even the faint hum of hospital activity around them. Baron, usually composed, found himself momentarily at a loss for words. He could only nod, his throat tightening with empathy. "That day," Sam continued, his voice cracking, "I lost more than my family. I lost my anchor, my reason to keep going." The pain of his loss consumed him, pulling him into a downward spiral he couldn't escape. He struggled to keep his job, his grief making it impossible to focus. Eventually, he lost his position as a teacher. Without an income, the bills piled up, and soon, his home was gone. "I tried to get back on my feet," Sam said, his hands gripping the edges of his chair. But it's hard when you're invisible to the world. People don't see you, they see what they think you are. A failure, a statistic. Years passed, and Sam found himself living on the streets, navigating the harsh realities of homelessness. Despite the constant struggle for food, shelter, and safety, he never entirely lost his sense of compassion. You see a lot when you're out there, he sees people at their worst. But sometimes you see the best too. A stranger offering a meal, a kind word. It's rare, but it's enough to remind you that humanity isn't all bad. That compassion was what led him to hope. I heard her crying that morning, he said, his voice trembling, near the dumpster where I sleep. At first, I thought it was a cat or something. But when I looked closer, he trailed off. His expression haunted. She was so small, so fragile. I couldn't just leave her there. I couldn't let her die. Baron listened silently, his respect for Sam deepening with every word. Despite everything Sam had endured, the losses, the isolation, the crushing weight of survival, he had still chosen to act selfless. You saved her, Baron said finally, his voice steady. When so many others would have walked away, you didn't. That mattered. Sam shook his head, his eyes brimming with tears. I couldn't save my own family, he said, his voice cracking with. But when I saw her, I thought, maybe this is my chance to do something wrong. Baron placed a hand on Sam's shoulder, his grip firm and reassuring. You did more than most people would have. You gave her a chance. And now we're going to make sure she has a future. Sam wiped his eyes, his shoulders sagging under the weight of his emotions. I don't deserve this, he said softly. Baron met his gaze. Everyone deserves a second chance, Sam. You include. For the first time in years, Sam felt seen, not as a homeless man, not as a failure, but as a human being who had faced unimaginable hardships and still found the courage to act with kindness. As the two men sat in the waiting room, their lives intertwined by the fragile thread of hope, Baron couldn't help but marvel at Sam's resilience. Here was a man who had lost everything, yet still chose compassion over despair. It was a reminder of the strength of the human spirit and the profound impact of even the smallest acts of kindness. After the immediate danger to baby Hope had passed and she was stabilized in the hospital, Baron Trump's focus turned to the next pressing matter, finding her family. It wasn't enough to save her life in the moment. She needed stability, a home, and a future. But the question loomed, where did she belong? Baron began by leveraging his resources, asking his Secret Service agents and other contacts to dig deep. They reached out to hospitals, shelters, and adoption agencies, casting a wide net in hopes of identifying someone connected to the infant. While the world outside buzzed with the media frenzy surrounding Baron's actions, inside the hospital, the search was methodical and relentless. Sam, still overwhelmed by the sudden shift in his life, sat nearby, nervously wringing his hands as the investigation unfolded. Baron encouraged him to stay involved. You're part of her story now, Baron said firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. Sam hesitated but eventually agreed, unable to shake the bond he had formed with the baby he had. Days turned into weeks with no solid leads, and Baron's frustration began to mount. He spent hours poring over updates and making calls, determined not to give up. Late one evening, just as the weight of the situation seemed unbearable, Baron's phone buzzed with an update from a private investor. We may have a lead, the voice on the other end said. A hospital record matches the baby's description. Baron's heart raced as the investigator explained further. A woman named Anna had been admitted to a nearby hospital a week earlier. She had been found unconscious after an overdose, just a few blocks from where Sam had discovered. The baby had been reported missing, but with Anna's condition and lack of family support, the case had gone unresolved. The next morning, Baron and Sam, accompanied by Secret Service agents, made their way to the hospital where Anna was recovering. When they entered her room, they found a frail woman sitting upright in bed, her eyes sunken and her hands trembling. At the sight of them, her expression shifted from confusion to desperation. Is she okay? My baby Hope, please tell me she's okay, Anna stammered, her voice cracked. Baron stepped forward, his voice steady but gentle. She's alive and safe, he assured. As the story of baby Hope and the extraordinary chain of events surrounding her rescue spread, it captured the attention of the nation. News outlets flooded the airwaves with coverage, and social media buzzed with hashtags like Hope for the Baby, Second Chances, and Baron Trump Speaks Out. The focus wasn't just on the miraculous rescue, but also on the people involved. Baron Trump, a figure many viewed as distant from everyday struggles. Sam, a homeless man whose act of kindness saved a life. And Anna, a mother fighting for redemption. Baron, usually reserved and deliberate in the public eye, chose to embrace the moment, not to bolster his own image, but to emphasize the importance of humanity and compassion. Standing outside the hospital, surrounded by a sea of reporters, he addressed the cameras with a calm yet powerful voice. "A baby's life was saved today," he began. "Not because of me, but because of a man most people would overlook, a man named Sam. He saw a life in danger and chose to act with courage and compassion." His words resonated deeply, and the crowd fell silent. Baron continued, "We can't ignore people like Sam. We can't judge them by their circumstances or failures. Today, he reminded us that no matter where we come from, every one of us has the power to make a difference." Sam, standing awkwardly beside Baron, was overwhelmed by the sudden attention. He wasn't used to being seen, let alone praised. "I didn't do anything special," he mumbled when a reporter asked about his actions. "I just couldn't leave her there." But the world disagreed. Sam's humility only fueled the public's admiration. Donations poured in, not just for Hope's medical care, but also for Sam's rehabilitation. People shared stories of their own struggles and acts of kindness, creating a wave of positivity that spread far beyond the city. Yet, as with any viral story, there were critics. Some questioned Sam's intentions, casting doubt on his version of events. Others accused Baron of using the situation for personal gain. Baron ignored the negativity, staying focused on what mattered: Hope's recovery and ensuring that both Anna and Sam had a path forward. While the world debated and speculated, Anna was quietly beginning her journey toward redemption. With Baron's help, she entered a rehabilitation program designed to address both her physical and emotional struggle. The first few weeks were difficult. There were moments when she wanted to give up, moments when the weight of her mistakes felt too heavy to bear, but she didn't. The thought of reuniting with Hope kept her going. Baron visited her periodically, offering words of encouragement. "This is your chance," he told her during one visit. "Not just for Hope, but for yourself. You can do that." Anna wasn't alone in her fight. Sam, too, was on a journey of transformation. Inspired by the support he received, he began volunteering at a local community center, helping others who were struggling with homelessness. At first, he was hesitant, unsure if his story would resonate. But when he shared his experiences, people listened. "I was at my lowest when I found Hope," Sam told a small group one evening. "But saving her saved me. It reminded me that even when everything feels lost, there's still a reason to keep going." Baron visited Sam at the community center one afternoon, watching as he guided others with empathy and understanding. "You found your purpose," Baron remarked, a hint of pride in his voice. Sam nodded. "I never thought I'd have one again, but now I want to help others find theirs." Meanwhile, Hope was placed in the care of a foster family, willing to provide her with a safe and nurturing environment, while Anna worked toward rebuilding her life. Baron stayed closely involved, ensuring that Hope received the best medical care and emotional support. "She's a fighter," the foster mother told Baron during one of his visits. "She's already come so far." The story of Hope, Sam, and Anna didn't fade away with time. Instead, it became a catalyst for a broader movement. Inspired by the events, people across the country began to take action, organizing food drives, volunteering at shelters, and advocating for support systems for those in need. Baron, who had always been cautious about leveraging his platform, became an unexpected champion for these causes. "This isn't about me," he told a reporter during an interview. "It's about what happens when we choose kindness over judgment. Small acts of courage and compassion can ripple outwards and change lives." Sam's story, in particular, resonated with people from all walks of life. Invitations poured in for him to speak at schools, community centers, and even corporate events. At first, he was overwhelmed by the attention. "I'm just a guy who made a choice," he would say. But Baron encouraged him to share his journey. "Your story can inspire others, Baron. You can show them that no matter how far they've fallen, there's a way back." Anna, too, became a symbol of redemption. After completing her rehabilitation program, she reunited with Hope in an emotional moment that left everyone in tears. "I'll never stop fighting for her," Anna promised, as she held her daughter close. "She gave me a reason to live." The media continued to follow the story, but Baron remained humble, deflecting praise and focusing on the bigger picture. This isn't about me, he reiterated during another press conference. It's about humanity. It's about reminding ourselves that no one is beyond safe. Years later, the impact of that single act of kindness continued to ripple outward. Sam, now a full-time employee at the community center, had become a mentor to countless individuals. Anna, healthier and stronger than ever, was a devoted mother to Hope, who had grown into a vibrant, curious child. Barron visited them occasionally, his connection to the family unwavering. One afternoon, he sat with Sam at the community center, watching as children played nearby. "Do you ever think about that?" Barron asked. "Every day," Sam replied, his voice steady. "It changed everything for me too," Barron said with a faint smile. In the distance, Anna and Hope waved at them, their laughter ringing out like a song of resilience. It was a moment that encapsulated everything the journey had been about, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, light could be. The story of Hope wasn't just about a baby, a homeless man, or a mother seeking redemption. It was about humanity. It was a testament to the power of compassion, the courage to act, and the belief that no one is beyond safe. As Barron reflected on the journey, one thought lingered in his mind. Sometimes, the smallest acts of courage create the biggest waves of change.